Well, hello, Crashing Podcast, and today I am joined by a very, very special guest, Johnny Echols, co-founder of the 60s band Love. I believe one of the most iconic bands of the 60s and released so many great albums. This podcast is filmed by Ian Davis, the owner of Stylus Records. He joined me on today's podcast. So I just want to say thank you to Ian Davis for helping me out on that. And I really don't know how this podcast came about. It just happened by chance, and I'm really happy about it. Like, I just contacted them, see if I could get their attention, and they got in contact with me, the manager of the band, and it happened. I ended up interviewing Johnny Echols, and Love are like probably one of my favourite bands of all time. All my favourite albums are by Love. I just love them so much. They're just amazing. Johnny Echols was such a cool bloke. It was nice to meet him. He signed my record and that. So I'm really, really happy to get Johnny Echols on. So I'm going to let you get on with listening to the podcast. I really hope you enjoy this one. Get sharing this podcast, people, and get sharing this podcast to Love fans. I'm sure there's a lot of Love fans out there. Also today I'm going to be playing some footage I took at the Hare and Hounds gig, so hope you enjoy.
That's exactly right. You should hear what we call them on the tour bus. Are you guys ready? It's alright, and I won't forget all the times I waited patiently for you, and you'll do just what you choose to do, and I will be all alone again tonight, my dear. Somebody said to me, you know that I could be in love with almost everyone. I think that people are the greatest fun, and I will be all over again tonight, my dear. By the halls you'll see the mantles where the light shines dim all around you. And the streets are paved with gold, and if someone asks you, you can call my name. You were just a thought that somewhere someone somehow feels as you get here. And it's all for you to touch, to smell, to be, to know where you are, yeah. And the streets are paved with gold, and if someone asks you, you can call my name. You can call my name. I ain't calling my name, yeah. Oh yeah. Oh my God. Singing, the bells of the school of war will be ringing. No confusion, blood transfusion. The news today will be the rumors of tomorrow. And I want us turn to blood, and if you don't think so, go turn on your tub. And if it's mixed with mud, you see it turn to gray. And you can call my name. I hear you calling my name. Johnny Echols on the lead guitar.
Well, hello, Crashing In Podcast, and today I am with co-founder of Love, Johnny Echols. You want to say hello?
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you.
How's the UK tour going so far?
Actually, it's going great. We've had sold out gigs so far.
Good.
Yeah, it's been lovely crowds and very good shows.
Cool. It's the 55th anniversary UK tour.
Correct.
And how do you feel like 55 years of the album?
Well, it's lasted a hell of a lot longer than I expected.
Yeah.
You know, actually, Forever Changes has never been out of print one day. So, and that's very rare for an album. So we're very proud of that.
Cool. So, did you expect the album to be as big as it is now?
No. We knew that we were doing something special at the time, but no one could ever, I could never have conceived, and neither could have Arthur, that it would have this kind of longevity and that the effect that it's had on so many people.
Yeah. So how would you say, what was the difference between the first couple of albums that you've done to the Forever Changes album?
Well, Forever Changes is a mature group. When the first album was a younger group, and it was a minimalist type of album, whereas this one is a much more mature album.
Yeah.
And it's full-fledged adults,
Yeah.
and we've gone from childhood to adult. And so the first album, we were still teenagers, still kids, but by the time we did Forever Changes, I was still a teenager, but I had far more maturity than I had at that particular time.
Yeah, yeah. So do you want to talk a bit of the background of Love and how you all met and why did you form a band?
Well, I knew Arthur my entire life,
Yeah.
of course, and we had played music the first incarnation of Love would have been with Billy Preston on keyboard and John Fleckenstein, who later was with the Standells, and Kenny Forsey, who was with the Safaris. And Henry Vestine was part of that, and he was with Canned Heat. Anyway, we came together and we formed a group, and we played at a place called the Brave New World in Hollywood, and we were the Grassroots then.
Yeah.
And we played there for several months, and we had a very, very large following. And Lou Adler had come down and seen us play. And one time he came in with a young lady, and he had been drinking. And he had mentioned how great he thought the group was and what he could do. Well, at that point, we didn't really know who he was. And so he's, flowering us with all of these compliments. And Brian mentioned that, we're on our break and we're going to have to go back and play. So why didn't you speak to our manager? And for some reason, he took that wrong. And he just turned on us quickly and said, "You'll never play in Hollywood again," that kind of silly cliche. And so we laughed at him, and that was the wrong thing to do, is to laugh, but it was funny. And a few weeks later, a regular at the club said, "We heard your new record, Mr. Jones." And I said, "We don't have any record." And it turned out that it was Ballad of the Thin Man, and Lou Adler had gone up north, I think the San Francisco area, and he'd recruited session musicians and recorded the song and decided to co-opt our name because we had a very large following, and he knew that if they thought it was us, they would rush to the record stores and buy it, which they did. And it moved up the charts before our people found out that it was not us. And so there was method to his madness. He was getting back at us, but he was also making a wise and smart business decision. And we had talked about suing because we had a trademark and we owned that, but we were told that he was an important man in the business, and the attorney said we could probably win in court, but we would lose in the end because, you don't cross people in this industry and expect to continue. So we chose a new name.
Cool. So as you're on the subject of the name, why the name Love?
Well, it's a strange thing. Arthur used to work in the shipping department of a place called Love Braziers. It was LUV Braziers. And Brian and I and Arthur were driving down Beverly one day, and we saw a billboard mentioning Love Braziers. And I said, Arthur used to work there. And we started laughing and kidding Arthur. And Brian said, "Man, that would be a great name for a group." And so we decided right then and there that we would change our name to Love, but only LOVE rather than LUV. And that's how we came up with that name. It's just cool. Out of the blue serendipity, and that billboard was there.
It's a great name.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about what was it like when you recorded your first ever album together, and how do you feel about that?
Well, the first album, we had played those songs well over a year every single night, so we were really well rehearsed. So we went into the studio, and I think we were there for a couple of days and finished the album.
Yeah.
And that was a live album, meaning that we were in the studio at the same time playing together and playing and singing at the same time. So because there was only a 2-track recorder, so there was no room to do any overdubs.
Yeah.
But we had wanted to do rather a minimalist album. They call it garage music now, but back at the time we wanted to do one that was live, the way we played. And that was our intention, but it did not turn out that way as far as we were concerned. It didn't have the same kind of drive that the live group had. So we were rather disappointed in the way it sounded. So.
It's still a great album.
Yeah, it's a good album, I think, but it could have been a much better album had we been in a different studio or with different engineers rather that
yeah.
were able to capture the live sound.
So, like, will you be playing any of like your earlier stuff as well on tonight's gig?
Yes, we will. We throw in, we do probably half of the first album.
Oh, great. Like, it'd be great to hear that music live as well.
Yes.
So what was it like performing Forever Changes music live? Was it more difficult compared to your like earlier music to perform?
Well, yeah, the songs are much more difficult. They're much more complex than the first album.
Yeah.
They were just kind of rock songs, and they were rather simple.
Yeah.
But the Forever Changes, those songs are very complex, and so these guys are just fantastic. Mike Randall and Rusty Squeezebot, David Green, and James Nolte. These are the people that are playing with me, and they're just magnificent musicians, and they do just a wonderful job playing it.
Well, is that the band Baby Lemonade?
Yes, it
is.
Yes.
So how did you cross paths with them?
Well, Arthur was playing with them from the early 90s. I think like 94 he began playing with them. And they toured and traveled, and around 2003 I joined them.
Okay.
And we've been doing it ever since, basically.
Yeah. Do you like them? Have you heard their music, and do you like the music?
Yes, I do. I like their music. These are consummate musicians, and they play beautifully, and they write great songs on their own. Yeah. But they do justice to Forever Changes, and they respect the music, and they revere that music, and you can hear it in the way they play.
Here we are, our hands are all untied. We'd rather walk than ride, and ride and ride and ride, 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 ride and ride and ride. There you stand, your eyes are in your head. You should have stayed in bed. Oh, Fred in bed and ride, ride, ride. Fred in bed and ride. I keep on telling myself everything is gonna change when I find someone to blame, and the people that I see won't bother me. I keep on hiding myself away from everything. What a thing to fix your brain. I guess I wanna be where it don't follow me. I keep on playing my drum. Hey! I keep on singing my songs. I just got out my little head. I keep on doing all the things that I should not do. Keep on building my hopes, and you keep turning down. What is this fooling around? Are we supposed to be like history? I keep on playing my drums. Keep on singing my songs. Oh yeah. Keep on doing all the things that I should never do. That's a deep cut called Laughing Stock. It's a what's a B-side of something, right? Of Your Mind and We Belong Together. Yeah. See? I just got out my little red book, and I got you to say goodbye. I'm going back to my little red book, I'm gonna say goodbye. Away from me to see, I took out every little girl in town, and they danced with me. As I held you, all I did was talk about you. Thinking, baby, I'll start you now, and just look at it over you. Oh no, there ain't no
Do you like the modern psych stuff, like the psych stuff that was coming about the 90s and stuff like that?
Well, there's some music from that era that I like. The 90s is fine, but today's music, I'm not. Because there's a much more of I guess, a hip hop or rap influence.
Yeah.
And I never really took the time or have any really desire to listen to rap. It just never
Not your music.
did it. It just didn't do it for me. I like music that has substance. And I like listening to musicians who have honed their craft, who have actually learned to play instruments.
Yeah.
And most, from what I know about rap, most of these are loops, and they're basically sampling other people's music and putting it together and then doing kind of sing-songy nursery rhymes over them. There were a couple of guys like Tupac. I thought he was fantastic. Biggie Smalls, DMX. There's a few people that I like.
Oh, yeah.
But for the most part, I'm just not into the music. I don't mean to put the music down. It's just not my
Your
cup
thing,
of tea.
yeah.
Right.
So back to the Forever Changes album. What was the albums like you was listening to then that kind of could have brought a bit of an inspiration to the album?
Well, see, Arthur and I grew up with listening to blues and country because our parents were into that.
Yeah.
And so, especially old school blues. And that initially was where we were going musically until Brian came along and he brought in more folk music and kind of Broadway show tunes. And we just kind of evolved into that. And then I always loved jazz, and those types of influences melded together to form what became Forever Changes.
Yeah. So, like, also with the lyrics, can we talk a bit about the lyrics and
Absolutely.
like who was writing the lyrics at the
Arthur
time?
Lee.
Yeah.
Arthur was a consummate poet. He always wrote stuff down. That was just who he was.
Yeah.
And he saw the world through very different eyes than most people, and it's reflected in the music. Now, he had this genius. Arthur was not a very good musician himself because he did not want to take the time. I mean, he had the soul of a musician.
Yeah.
He just did not want the requisite time necessary to become a good musician. So he trusted us, to develop ideas that he had come up with, and we would go with that. He would start like, Arthur always sang the songs. He would, even though they had no chords or structure, he would just, every time you see him, he would be singing the songs that he was writing. And so we got to know the songs and the melodies before there were any chords. And so Brian and I basically put chords to that. And Michael Stewart Ware did the rhythmic counterpoint to the chords. And so we kind of just trial and error, we played something. And Arthur said, well, I like that, or I don't like that. And we kept going back and forth until we came up with a song that everybody was happy with and that he especially was happy with. And the thing was, if we laid down a chord and then he said, that's great, I love that, that would become part of his song. And if a week later we went back to that song, we would have to remember what we played before because that had become part of the song.
Yeah.
And so he did that over and over and over again until he had, in his head, the song was what he had envisioned it to be.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was an interesting process to do it that way, but it worked.
Oh, great. So how long did it take to record the album?
Well, it took over time, probably about 6 months. We started, it was a false start because we had expected to go in and do a double album, and things changed at the very end. And so there were some problems, and we worked out our problems and went back into the studio and finished the album.
Oh, great. So what was it like? How did people react to the release when it released?
When it was first released, there was not a lot of publicity. We did have a billboard on Sunset Boulevard, but by then the doors were breaking. And most of the record company's attention was focused on pushing them because they had a #1 record. And so a lot of the resources, or just about all of the resources, were focused on pushing the doors forward. So when that record came out, it didn't receive the attention that it should have, nor did it receive the promotion that it should have.
So when did it like all kick off? Like the
Well, it took us years and years for people to finally, to catch on.
Yeah.
Because I think Forever Changes was ahead of its time, because if just the lyrically, this is sheer poetry when you listen to the words of the song. And how it interplays with the music is just fascinating. Even now, listening to it, I think, wow, we really did something special. Yeah. And it took a while, but especially over here, it was always, I think it charted initially, and Forever Changes, as I mentioned before, has never been out of print in over 55 years.
Yeah.
And this was a main audience, and the UK was. And it kind of hit over here, and then pretty soon the people in the US and Europe and other places started catching on, and now actually it's selling more now than it ever did.
Oh, blimey.
Yeah.
It's a very iconic album, like it's one of my favourite albums, and it has a very fresh sound, even for now, like it sounds very modern. And would you agree with that, like that it sounds like
Yes,
relevant today? Like,
I would say that it's timeless, and it has that feel that sometimes you can, if you want to pick out and say that song reflects a certain time period, but Forever Changes seems to me, and I can listen to it and it still sounds fresh to me. And I can't compare it to anything else because it's basically incomparable.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about some of the albums you've done after, what was that like, the response to the albums after Forever Changes, like compared to that album? Like,
well, by then after Forever Changes, we did a song called You're Mine and We Belong Together, and we were working on doing another album, fourth album, but the problems that were happening during Forever Changes kind of caused a rift in the group, and so Brian initially left, and then Kenny and I left, and I moved to New York and became a studio musician, and so I stayed there for a number of years, and Arthur carried on playing with a host of different individuals, but none of the records ever came close to Forever Changes.
No, that was like the big one. Like,
yes. And after that, it was just basically treading water.
Yeah. So do you find it mad that it's like a big seller now?
Pardon me?
Do you find it like quite unbelievable like, how it's a big seller now?
Well,
like?
yes, I think it's finally caught on to people, and it is amazing to me, but it deserves. It's really a well done, well written, well played album.
Yeah.
And so and well produced album. So it's receiving the recognition that's long overdue. And I'm only sorry that Arthur's not here to see that. But he did. He was able to, toward the end, get the recognition that was so richly deserved.
Yeah, definitely. And was there any musicians at the time you believe that was like underrated and didn't get recognised at the time?
Oh, there are lots of musicians that were underrated, but we listened to jazz a lot. So, the jazz musicians that we thought should have had a much larger place in the music spectrum that just didn't for some reason. So it's just people's tastes.
So how many more dates have you got with this tour?
Gosh, I think we have about 12 more, I believe, something like that. But we've played to sold out audiences every one of the gigs. So hopefully that will continue. And we will close in London, I believe it's on the 11th or 12th.
Yeah. So, how was the gigs before? Were there good crowd? And
Great crowds. The people are really responsive, and it was fun. It's really, they sing along with them. They know all the lyrics. It's great.
And do you like touring in the UK?
Absolutely, yes. This is one of my favorite places to tour because the crowds are so responsive, and we just feel at home here.
Yeah. So after the tour, have you got any plans after that with the band?
Oh yeah, we continue.
Oh great.
Yeah, we will continue touring and playing together. As long as people want to come out, and support it, we are there to play.
Great. And would you be like planning on touring again in the UK? Like,
Yes, we're planning that right now. We're working
great.
on coming back. Yeah, so we definitely will. And we're trying to expand it to Europe and other places. I had offers from Japan, and so
Brilliant.
we're looking into that, and hopefully that will turn out.
Oh, great. So is there anything that we haven't covered in the podcast that you'd like to talk about?
No, I'm satisfied that we've
Great.
covered this.
Oh, great. And also, is the last question I like to ask in the podcast, have you got anything inspiring for the listeners to say?
Inspiring? Well, I would like to thank the listeners for all the support that they've given us over these years. And it is humbling, and it is, it is also inspiring to say that we've remained relevant for all of these years, which is something that not very many musicians from our era can say. So I'm grateful and humble and so appreciative of that.
Thank you very much for joining me for an interview, and really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Love are like one of my favourite bands ever.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much, and take care, and have a good tour.
I shall. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sitting on a hillside, watching all the people die. I feel much better on the other side of the Rhine. I believe in magic. Why? Because it is so quick. I don't need power and I'm hypnotized. Look in my eyes. What do you see? I see. What do you feel? I feel Will Brummy when my name is Phil. Or was that Jim? Life goes on here, day after day. I don't know if I'm living or if I'm supposed to be. Sometimes life is so eerie, and if you think I'm unhappy, hate me run. I've been here once. I've been here twice. I don't know the first, the fourth, or the fifth too bad. Sometimes I deal with numbers, and if you wanna count me out. I don't need the times of day. Anytime with me is okay. I just don't want to use enough of my time, 'cause that's not right. away the key. I wonder who'll be it tomorrow, Trump or me. They're locking him up today. They're throwing away the key. I wonder who'll be it tomorrow, Trump or me. They're locking him up today. They're throwing away the key. I wonder who'll be it tomorrow, Trump or me. We're all normal and we want our freedom. 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 I want my freedom. Children's got to have their freedom.
Well, that was Johnny Echols, and that was also the song Red Telephone, performed by the band Love Revisited. Absolutely brilliant, and I think they're still on tour right now. So look out for the dates and get yourselves a ticket to go see them. They're absolutely brilliant to see live. The gig was just amazing. Like, obviously, it's not the same without Arthur Lee, but it was still amazing, especially if you haven't saw Love before Arthur Lee died, because it's amazing to just hear these songs off Forever Changes album live. It was an experience, and I wish I could repeat that night. It was absolutely brilliant, and Forever Changes will always be one of my favourite albums ever, and that gig was a very special one for me. So and talking to Johnny Echols as well was very special, because obviously Love are my favourite band, so it was certainly an amazing experience. Last Tuesday, the podcast with Johnny Echols, it was just amazing, and I'm really happy I had the opportunity to talk to him. So I just want to say thank you to Ian Davis, owner of Stylus Records, for filming the podcast and coming to the gig with me. I want to say thank you to the manager of Love Revisited and Johnny Echols. So if you're new to the podcast, and you just click the link because you love one of your favourite bands, please keep watching the podcast. There's got so many podcasts coming along the lines of psychedelia. Got some indie stuff, alternative and synthy stuff, hip hop. We put all genres on this podcast, so keep listening. Subscribe to the channel if you like it, and also share the podcast if you enjoyed it. So the next podcast was meant to be this week's podcast, but it's actually next week's podcast, and that is with a band called Flake. They're a bit of a modern day blues band. They're the modernised blues music, and I think they're absolutely brilliant. So stay tuned for that podcast. That'll be next week's podcast, and also keep sharing this podcast if you can. Really appreciate you guys listening. Take care, and please like if you enjoyed the video.